And good evening and welcome to tonight's edition of the Scanner Guys. We haven't ran one of these in a long time, asking us some questions tonight during tonight's program. Bear with me, I'm the only one doing this, so it'll take a bit for me to read your question and also, go from there. So I don't have a producer or anything. But I want to answer some of your questions. We get a lot of those, through the chat, and I'd like to spend the evening kind of go through some of your questions. Dave asks a question. He has a friend that has the 325P2 programmed with a phase 1 system, and he's only receiving certain groups. So that's all going to fall on how he's programming the radio. Questions that I would ask right off the bat: is he using software like Butel or FreeScan or ProScan? Those are going to be key. If he's programming these systems in manually, that could be an issue because, slight mistake here and there will cause wonky things with the programming. So I need a little bit more details on that. But, there could be a lot of things it could be. If they're importing the system in from Radio Reference using one of those softwares, they need to make sure they're importing in the correct talk groups. They also need to make sure that they're importing in the correct sites or site. Now, keep in mind that all talk groups don't affiliate to every single site on the system. For instance, if you are in Ohio and you are monitoring Cincinnati and you decided to move up to Columbus, the MARC system is up there. If you programmed a local site that was in Columbus and you trying to monitor Cincinnati talk groups, those talk groups are not going to work on that site because it's not affiliated to that site. But we'll need more details on that. That's a hard question to answer without more details. Let me just look at some other questions here. John's asking, he's thinking about using some quick keys with his SDS 100 for home and travel. Will there be an update to the SDS 100 for all quick keys to be turned on or off for the favorites list in database mode? So you can turn on or off all favorites lists. You would have to go into the menu and then be able to go in and turn off all favorites lists. There is a way to do that. So kind of you can do that. So let's say you are monitoring a couple of favorites lists and then you ended up, wanting to start from scratch and you had a whole bunch of them on. So what you would basically do, go to that menu, turn off all favorites lists, and then use those quick keys to turn on the favorites list that you want to monitor. So there is a workaround to it. For myself, I don't really use quick keys. I just go into the menu, turn on and off favorites lists that I want to monitor. Hopefully that makes sense. John also asked the same question about using this with GPS traveling. So with GPS traveling, I typically use favorites lists for GPS traveling. What I end up doing is you have to, within the favorites list, you have to enable GPS operation on those favorites lists. So in order for it to work, that has to be enabled. So that will basically allow you to be able to turn that on or off. So typically with my radio that's in my truck, I create a favorites list and I will indicate whether or not GPS is turned on by adding that to the name. So let's say I do favorites list that's for all the State Police Highway Patrol for all of the Northeast United States. So I would probably name it, Northeast NESP, and then put a dash GPS. So I know that this favorites list has GPS enabled on it. So that is an indication. Like my railroads, I have a railroad service search that's on my 536. GPS is not enabled on that. So basically, I just have our search, and then I turn that on. It'll turn on that search no matter where I am in the country. It won't turn it off. So within a favorites list, you're able to turn on GPS scanning or turn it off. So make sure that you have on those favorites lists that you want to use GPS scanning, you have it enabled. If you don't have it enabled, whatever you have in that favorites list will be scanned no matter where you are. So let's say if you created a favorites list for Boston and you're traveling east, traveling west, I should say, that favorites list will remain on regardless where you're at because you don't have GPS enabled on it. Other favorites lists that you may have enabled will turn things on and off as you travel. Great questions. Let me take a look at some more questions that are coming in through the live chat. For whatever reason, a couple of people's questions did not filter in here, so I'm having to look at the website. Question about 911 dispatch centers merging with other dispatch centers. Does this mean they help each other from both counties on the P25 Phase 2 system and other analog? I'm not too sure if I'm reading that question right, but there's a lot of regional dispatching, especially where I'm at in Cincinnati. So I believe, there's regional dispatching done where I'm located. I'm in the northwest corner of the county. And there's a west talk group, and then there's an east talk group. And a lot of the cities or towns are clustered in either east or west. And that talk group, they dispatch everybody on that channel. So you're finding a lot of that as well. Sometimes, they may use more than one talk group, and it'll be a group of dispatchers that may rotate, on various desks. So the great thing about regional dispatching is, you're able to handle multiple cities or towns at once. I know that the community that I'm in, they still have their old analog system, so they use that as a fallback to the trunk system. So a lot of times I'll just hear them. It's like a talk around channel. They're talking about, I'm arriving on scene. So-and-so's not here. So you're getting more of the details on that analog channel than you would on the talk group because there's a lot more communication on that channel. So they're not able to kind of fill each other in when they're arriving on scene. So they'll use this channel as a secondary. This probably was back in the day once their actual dispatch channel before they moved over to the MARC system. So there's a lot of question about antennas, where to find mag mount antennas for the 700 and 150 megahertz for the car. There's tons of websites out there. ScannerMaster does have antennas that are single band antennas that work very well on VHF, UHF, and then of course that high band 800 megahertz. So that would be a great place to start, scannermaster.com. There's an affiliate link there. Most of their mobile antennas are NMO mount. So you would need to purchase an NMO mag mount to be able to put that on. So it would be a 2-item purchase. One, you would select your antenna, and then you would purchase your mounting gear. So that's a good place to start. There's other websites that are out there. that do sell antennas. More than likely, it's going to be an NMO antenna, and then you're going to need to purchase an NMO mount. So usually those are sold in 2 separate parts. Brandon's asking, is it possible to rig up a mobile antenna to be a base antenna rather? It's either a scanner or CB. So typically you can do a mobile antenna as a base antenna. My previous setup at the house here, I had a mobile antenna with a mag mount with a ground plane, and then it had the rods going in each direction. I cut those rods down for the frequency band that I was most focused on, which was the VHF. So yes, typically you would purchase a kit that would convert that NMO mount to a base antenna. Let me just see if scannermaster.com still has it on the website. We'll take a look right now. So hold on 1 second as I do that. So we're going to do base mounting gear. Let's see. Yep. All right, so I'm going to show my screen right now and show you what this looks like. So ScannerMaster does have this. It is in stock. So here it is right here. This is the tram base mounting kit. So it goes for $39.95. It has the NMO mount at the top, and then of course you're able to connect up an antenna on the top here. And then this is a PL259. So I probably recommend, maybe some LMR 400. These elements here on the side can be cut down and optimized for the band that you're trying to monitor. So if you're very much focused on VHF or UHF or any other band, you could cut these down. Typically, these kits come with a pamphlet with instructions on what you need to do. So you would basically, get this, and let's say you were doing the telco low profile mobile antenna. So you take this NMO mount antenna, mount it on the top, and then you would be all set there. So you basically side mount that to a pole here, allowing you to be able to put this as a base antenna. Great question. Let's continue scrolling down here. Chris mentions that his county has a dispatch center for both the city and the county. Yes, so that's another thing that's handy, is being able to do mutual aid. That is definitely a great thing when it's regional dispatching. You're able to do mutual aid. That is a great key thing. So going back to KE2BJM question about, do they work together? Yes. A lot of times it's easier to coordinate. Let's say if all the cars in one community are tied up, they may have a neighboring department roll in on scene to be able to help out. I remember growing up in Middleborough, Massachusetts, and Middleborough and Lakeville were both on the same channel. So oftentimes, if there was something going on in Lakeville just over the Middleborough line, Middleborough police would back up into Lakeville until one of the Lakeville police officers was able to free up and to be able to assist. So yeah, I mean, that was early to being able to do that regional dispatching. Although Middleborough police had their own dispatcher and Lakeville police had their own dispatcher. They were identified as Station M, and then Lakeville was M1. Since then, Middleborough and Lakeville both have their own frequency now, so they're not on the same frequency anymore. Any good optimization tips for scanning analog alongside of trunking? If possible, if you do have more than one scanner, you may want to separate out the analog from the digital. Sometimes the digital can come in super loud, and the analog could be a little softer and quiet, so you may be riding the volume knob a little bit. The other thing that you can do with the scanner is, especially on the Uniden side, where it has systems, you can set the dwell time. Typically, it's, I can't remember what it is, it's a couple of seconds. And it'll dwell on that system, move to the next system, and then continue going. Usually, factory default is usually rule of thumb. If you're missing a lot of the analog transmissions for whatever reason, maybe you set the dwell time for that system that has the analog channels in a little bit longer. It's all experimenting to see which you find the best feel for it. But yeah, you can do, adjustments to that dwell time. Typically with scanners, and I've said this before in programming shows, less is more. If you throw in everything into the programming, I mean everything, it's going to take it longer to go through and scan all the way back to the beginning, because it's got to go through all of those things before it works its way back. So when you do less in a scanner, it's going to rapidly go faster through that list of things that you're scanning. So that's when, if you do have more than one radio, you partition your programming. Maybe you've got local police and fire on one scanner. Maybe you have the state police in another scanner. And maybe you have, if you're blessed with a third radio, maybe you have all the other stuff in that radio. So if you do have more than one radio, divide up what you like to monitor. And then you'll be less likely of missing radio transmissions. Especially with analog. If you have an old BCT15X laying around that you're not using, put that to use. Program some analog channels in there. Railroad channels, aviation. Maybe you like to monitor GMRS or ham. Put that radio to use, and then partition that out of the digital radio, so you're not tying up the digital radio with analog stuff. Do you get better reception on your scanner if you ground the antenna, the radio? I haven't seen any difference with the reception. I've grounded my base antenna, which is the Austin Ferret. I actually have that back up at this location. I was able to figure out how to get that up without having so many issues. So I've got a complete new setup. I ran brand new coax cable, LMR 400, for my Ferret, and then also LMR 400 for my GMRS rig, because I also have a GMRS base radio. So I have two antennas up on the roof. But yeah, grounding the antennas hasn't had any effect with reception. I find that it's no different. Hi, Sarah. Welcome to the program in Pembroke. So, Brandon's asking about the weather and how it is in our neck of the woods here. So in Ohio, it's been very hot, like everywhere else, and air condition is fighting the temperatures because they increase so fast during the day, and also the humidity. Also, that plays an effect on reception. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. It depends on the combination of what's going on. But yeah, so far, it's been a warm week. I'm happy that hopefully some cooler temperatures will be coming around soon. Michael, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for watching. The Train Master 64 is, or Train Man, I should say, 64. Do you have a list of favorite frequencies for the Cincinnati area? I don't, but I could work on creating one. I mean, there are a handful of railroad frequencies that I do monitor, which are a lot of the road channels and the dispatch channels. As for channels that I monitor in Cincinnati, a lot of stuff on the MARC system. I do like monitoring in Butler County because I'm so close to Butler County. I monitor Fairfield and Hamilton. The great thing about those two communities is they're on one talk. Each community has its own talk group for law enforcement, and so I'm able to follow a story. So let's say if something's going on in Hamilton, all I'm hearing on that talk group is Hamilton PD. Same thing for Fairfield. All I'm hearing is Fairfield. So if I wanted to lock into it, I could just listen to what's going on. Versus where I'm at, the community that I'm in has got that east and west dispatch. So I'm hearing every city or town that whatever's going on. If I'm monitoring the talk group for the west, it's everything that's going on in that area. And the same thing on the east, same type of story on that. Brandon's asking, are you ever going to do another interview with the Scanner School? Sure. Whenever he would like to have me back on the show, I'd be happy to come on the program and talk about anything that he would want to talk about. I've been on there twice. One time as a representative Scanner Master, and then another time as a representative of the Scanner guys. So yeah, definitely, I would be open to that if he would like me to be a guest again on the show. I'd be happy to do that. Rich Carlson, yep, I email back and forth with him. I mean, we don't talk as much as we used to, just because he's busy with things that are going on in his life. Occasionally, we'll send an email. I did see him when he was up at the Dayton Hamvention. So I did speak to him for a short period of time there. But, I don't communicate with him as much as I used to, just because, he's got a lot going on, and I'm also got everything that I have going on. Dale Osborne is in the audience tonight. Welcome, welcome. So there was something asked about, does weather affect antennas? Weather more so affects reception. Different weather situations can make it good or bad depending on what's going on in the environment. So I remember, now I'm not going to get into the science of all of it, but I remember back in the day when I had Nextel phones, and the reception wasn't the greatest. It was kind of horrible where I was at. But I noticed, when you did have some snow, when it was snowing, of all things, the reception actually got better than worse, when I was in a certain environment. But yeah, solar storms can cause reception, can improve it. It's depending on what's going on out there, communication is very interesting. We've talked about this before on the show, where I had a customer that was up in Rhode Island. And, that Rhode Island trunk system's got a couple of towers, I believe 3 off the top of my head. And he would notice in the winter, he would end up getting more than one tower. And then when summer rolled around, he wasn't getting the other tower. So then, we kind of troubleshooted it. And I said, all right, I'm wondering if it's the foliage. When, give me a call back in the fall once the leaves have departed, and let me know if you receive, that system again. So lo and behold, he did call me up and said, yes, he was able to receive that system again. So even that will play a role in how reception goes. So all different things to be able to keep in mind. White Stallion's asking about good evening, digital and analog gain controls. How, when, and why to use them. I don't typically mess with the analog and digital settings on there. Typically, you go, when you do it, remember where your starting point is. And if you make it worse, go back to your starting point. So you want to be careful when you're messing with that stuff. Typically, I really don't mess with it. For the most part, the only time I did mess with it is during beta testing, when, trying to see if I can make an improvement or make it worse. But for the most part, factory default on some of these settings typically can be the best, unless you're in a unique situation where things are not working so well in the digital or the analog. Then you want to try messing with that. But always remember your starting point, and if you make things worse, you know where to return back to. But yeah, I mean, for me, I really don't mess around with that, because I feel like, what it is on default typically is best for me. But yeah, I mean, every situation is unique and different. Any other questions, comments? So I'm going to try to do some more videos where it kind of shows an out of the box of various items. I do have a lapel speaker that Scanner Master manufactured, which I need to sit down and work on. So that's something that I'm going to be working on an unboxing video, and then going over the features and how well it works, so like a product review. So it should be either 1 or 2 videos from that item. I do have that lapel speaker. I just have to get a chance to be able to record all the videos. Question about how do indoor discount antennas perform? Are they better than aftermarket scanner antennas like the Smiley antennas? So the disc cone base antenna, of course, is a larger antenna, and it's a wideband antenna. So here's the thing with antennas. It's all about placement of the antenna, where it is. So if you're going to do an antenna, up and out is your best option. If you're able to get the antenna higher and out of the structure, that's a huge help with reception. If you're not able to get the antenna out of the structure, then if you can get the antenna closer by a window or higher up in the structure, inside the structure, that will help. The thing is if you're running an antenna somewhere else, don't go cheap on the coax cable. Because if you put in cheap coax cable, you're defeating the purpose of moving the antenna either higher up in the dwelling or higher up and out of the dwelling. So then keep that in mind. As for comparison to disc cone antennas versus the Smiley antennas, it's different. I mean, if Smiley had a disc cone base antenna, then we could compare apples to apples. Unfortunately, they don't. There's a lot of theirs are rubber duck antennas. They've done some antennas they can convert to a mobile. In the grand scheme of things, when it comes to antennas, there's a lot of personal opinion. And also it's based on your situation and what you're monitoring. For example, if I'm monitoring, railroad channels, I'm going to use an antenna from Smiley that's going to be tuned to the 160 megahertz. So it's going to work best for me because of what I'm monitoring. And maybe you're monitoring police and fire, so that's not going to be an antenna you're going to select. You're going to do whatever antenna that you need. So let's say if they're on an 800 megahertz trunk system, then you're probably going to go to a tuned antenna to that band. So a lot of it is personal preference when it comes to antenna. So it's basically finding the best antenna for the job. The SDS 100 has some filters made for simulcast. Yep. Certainly, if you're using any of those filters, remember your starting point. And then if it makes it worse, go back to your regular setting. A lot of times, less is more with simulcast. We've talked about this before in our previous shows. Maybe the paperclip antenna, being able to kind of get a lesser of an antenna, sometimes will really help things with reception. The other thing too is being able to adjust your squelch settings. Maybe opening that, closing that gate, closing the gate a little bit more, or opening up. May adjust and help. You don't want the radio to be so sensitive, so loosening that squelch a little bit, so it's kind of eliminating that weaker signal. So there's a lot of different things when it comes to that. So definitely keep that in mind. Jason H. Mentions he has several radios with military air bands split up into groups. He searches by band. I can listen to different parts of the band on each radio. Can you think of a more efficient method? What you're doing sounds great. So you're dividing up the programming or dividing up the search, so you're able to search a lot faster. Keeping that in mind, if you're breaking that search into segments, you're able to search each segment by however you need. So it's faster to find frequencies, and you're less likely to lose radio transmissions. So yeah, when you're able to do radios, and let's say if you got a stack of radios, you're able to divide up, that search, or you're able to divide up that programming. The only thing is if all those departments are busy, you're going to get a lot of audio coming at you, and then it's basically adjusting your volume. Maybe the top scanner is the most priority, so you're going to have the volume up at a higher point, and maybe the other two radios are not so important. The other thing that you can do without having a lot of fancy speaker equipment is buying external speakers. So if you've got like 3 radios, maybe you put a speaker to the left, speaker to the right, and maybe the other speaker in the center. So you'll be able to hear the audio coming from this side. It's coming from this radio, and the radio on this side, it's coming from that other radio, and maybe a speaker in front of you. If you've got 3 radios, it's coming from the front of you, it's coming from there, and then adjusting your volume. When you have all the radios, of course, they're going to be all next to each other, and the speakers are all in the same spot. It can get a little bit crazy, but you will get accustomed to listening things to the left or to the right, and then adjusting that volume accordingly. Yes, I'm planning on doing some other Railfan meetups. Been busy with the club, so hopefully planning on doing one in July. There's another planned in August, and I think we may go deeper into the fall for Railfan meetups. So I'm definitely planning on doing that. I'll put that up on the Train Aficionado of course website, and then YouTube channel. We'll announce it on there, and then of course on the Cincinnati Railroad Club's social media as well. So definitely good with that, doing some more of those. It's just been quite crazy. I've had a lot of events on most weekends, so I'm just trying to jockey those into the schedule. How efficient is close call? So basically, close call, for you to get an understanding of it, is the radio is looking for strong signals that are close to you. So let's say you have a security officer communicating on a two-way radio, and he's in line of sight of you. And you're in the parking lot. You can see him across the parking lot talking on his radio. That's what close call is meant for, to be able to kind of seek out that strong signal and be able to pick it up. So this is not a way to program your scanner by any means, but this is a great way to be able to be, like somewhere like in a mall or a shopping center, and you're wondering what frequency they're using to communicate on. Throw your radio into close call. When they communicate, your radio is discriminating all the other signals and looking for the most strongest signal that's around you. And because that person's transmitting on a two-way radio and you're within line of sight of them, that's probably one of the signals it will pick up. With some kind of amplifiers. Not too sure. There are amplifiers out there. I don't use that many of them, but they do help. Okay, so asking about, I'm guessing this is the New Jersey trunk system, the NJICS. I can pick up from the database, but I cannot pick it up from my favorites list. Okay, so take a look at make sure you've programmed your scanner correctly. You want to make sure that you've not only selected the sites, but the talk groups you want to monitor. And yet again, like we talked about at the top of the show with one of the questions, not every talk group will affiliate with every site. So because I'm monitoring the MARC system here in Cincinnati, and let's say if Cleveland is also on that system, if I program in one of their talk groups, I'm not going to hear it. One, I'm not in range of one of the sites that are around Cleveland. And two, that particular talk group is not shared statewide. Now, there may be some talk groups that are on the MARC system that are shared statewide. I can assure you that the Cleveland Police or Fire is not. So it all depends on what sites you're monitoring. For instance, monitoring a highway patrol, I'm going to be able to hear the barracks or stations that are in this area. As for, across the state, I'm probably not going to hear those unless I'm monitoring a site that's near there. CB-wise, can I use a mono or stereo adapter with headphones? That's going to be all based on the model of the radio. With some radios, it depends on what the jack is. A mono or stereo jack may be sufficient. So it all depends on the internal jack of the radio. There's not a rule of thumb that goes across, for every single radio. Unfortunately, I don't do too much with CB radios, so I don't know, most of the radios, which way it would go, which is a preference. But it all depends on the jacket that's inside the radio. With certain radios, stereo with a headphone jack plays better than a mono or vice versa. So it all really depends. Any other questions or comments? Hopefully I'm not missing anybody's questions or comments. I'm trying to keep up with them as much as possible. If they're not coming in, I apologize. I use software for the broadcast, and what it does is it'll bring it in here to be able to read it. But yeah, there's all types of good stuff in the chat right there. So yes, so the shows, if you haven't watched in a while, basically have switched from the fourth Wednesday of the month. So you're able to catch us here. And then the second Wednesday of the month is Train Aficionado Live. Right now, I'm juggling a couple of things, in between, work and, doing stuff with the Cincinnati Railroad Club. It's hard for me to be able to do 4 shows a month, where I was doing 2 Train Aficionado shows and 2 Scanner Guys shows every month. So my bandwidth is a little bit thinner. If a department uses conventional P25 and they still use radio IDs, is there any way to see that? Yes. You would have to turn on radio ID. Now, when I was living in Massachusetts, the North Attleboro Police were using P25 conventional. Now, on my unit in radio, I turned on displaying the unit ID number. In most cases, it'll say the cruiser number on there if the radio maintainer has done it in that fashion. And then their portables would be, whatever portable number they have. So yes, you would have to turn it on within the settings on the scanner to display the ID. But sometimes the radio maintainer will switch the radio from one vehicle to another, and I've noticed that in North Attleboro, that car number 26's radio is really in car number 30. And I would hear that in dispatch and then see it on the screen. I'm saying, oh, well, that used to be in a different vehicle. So it all really depends. If they've got an active radio maintainer that's updating that, then it's pretty accurate. But yeah, you can set on a radio, especially in the unit inside, to be able to display radio ID. It's different instructions on different radios. Not all radios support it. Does Scanner Master set PayPal payments? They take all major credit cards. I'm not too sure if they still have a PayPal checkout, but they do accept all major credit cards. How many miles can your scanner pick up trains? So this is a question I'm asked all the time. So with the railroads, they're line of sight. So the communication is on VHF, which plays pretty well for distance. It's the 160 megahertz. And typically you'll hear the dispatcher quite often because they're transmitting on sites or towers that are along the line, and usually they're high up. So oftentimes you'll hear the dispatcher communicating, and when you're hearing the crews, that is going to be when they're closer to you or when you're line of sight of them. For me, here in in Ohio, I have an antenna on the roof, which then helps me to get more distance. And because it's up and out of the house, I'm able to hear those crews a little bit better. And I'm, of course, able to hear the dispatcher. So the antenna helps. Having an antenna outside of your home will increase your range, but it's all going to play into your location, their location, and what's in between you and them. So terrain has an effect. So if your house is in a valley, maybe you put an antenna on the house, maybe that helps. But if let's say your house is high up on a hill, you put an antenna on the outside of your house, you may find that you get more reception. For me, I'm higher elevation here. So for me, where I'm located in the northwest area of Cincinnati, I'm able to hear a lot of stuff of the north of me. So, for example, I'm able to hear train crews communicating on the radio in Fairfield, which is just north of me. I'm able to hear them in Hamilton. Also able to hear them maybe slightly further north. But that all plays into where they're located on the line, what's going on with the weather. If there's any interference, it all plays into it. So there's some days my reception could be horrible. And then there's other days, the reception could be phenomenal. So, everything, weather, time of year, all play into it. So there was a question about the PD near me uses analog UHF with Kenwood radios, and the transmit unit ID sounds at the end. Is it possible to read that ID? On digital, yes. On analog, not so much. If you had a Kenwood radio and it was programmed properly, and it supported being able to read that radio ID, then yes, it would definitely do that. On the scanner, it depends on the model and whether or not it supports that. I know on digital, conventional, yes, it does support it, as long as it's set up properly. Brandon's asking about, do you ever listen to the scanner while watching those live episodes? I'm guessing that you're referring to Live on Patrol. So Live on Patrol is typically, I have listened to some of the departments that are on there, and it's typically about a 20-minute delay or more. So when you're seeing it on TV, it's something that may have happened about 20 minutes or so ago. So there is a little bit of time before it goes on TV. From my understanding, during that show, typically the police chief or whoever's in charge is previewing what goes on for broadcasts. And basically they're giving the green light either to air it live on, air it on TV or not. So it is live to a degree, but it's anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes, before you see it on the TV. So if you are monitoring one of those departments, of course, on the scanner you're going to hear it real time, and then you'll see what was happening later on. Do you know any aviation YouTube channels? There's a lot of them out there. Chris Schultz, which is an avid viewer of the show, he follows several of these aviation YouTube channels. There's a couple of groups that actually will set up at a viewing area and stream live at a major airport. Planes coming in and out of the airport, and they'll and those are really cool. So there's tons of stuff on YouTube, but yes, there is some aviation dedicated YouTube channels out there. So definitely do some searches. I know Chris is a huge fan of one of those channels, and he's actually met the gentleman that actually hosts that channel. Yeah, the BCT15X is great, for analog channels, and it will help to speed up the scanning speed of, because you're separating all those channels. You think of, if you've got everything thrown in your SDS 100 or 200, analog and digital, it's going to slow it down. But if you've got just the digital channels or talk groups in that digital radio, and then you move all the analog talk groups over to an analog radio, it's going to scan faster because the list has gotten shorter. And then you've kind of separated out that list. Question about Whistler. What's going on with them? So I did meet some of the people that are at Whistler. They are in the process of doing some things, with the scanner line, which hopefully we'll be seeing hopefully shortly or soon. I did ask them if they would be willing to come on the show. They said they'd be more than happy to when they have something going on that they want to share with the scanner community, so which I'm really excited about because, previous management over at Whistler, they weren't interested in, coming on or they never reached out to us. So that would be great being able to have that. Hopefully we'll get something from Whistler, like a new product to be able to talk about, because we're always looking for something to talk about on the channel. But as of right now, I haven't heard anything at the moment from Whistler. Yeah, so Chris posted about the airplane videos live. They're on YouTube, and it sounds like they're live right now. So I'm competing with them. Thankfully, I'm not on for hours, so you'll be able to go to that. But yeah, definitely, there's a lot of great stuff that's out there. A lot of great YouTube channels. But yeah, I mean, there's pretty much something out there for whatever interests that you may have. Any other questions or comments before we wrap up tonight's show? We're approaching 52 minutes past the hour. Here on the East, it's 8:52. If not, we'll wrap up tonight's program. Hopefully, I've been able to answer everybody's question. If it didn't filter in through, I do apologize. But we'll definitely do another one of these Ask the Scanner guys again. I was a little hesitant doing this because it's a lot, for me to be talking live and also trying to read the questions that are scrolling in on the channel at the same time. So it takes a little bit. It's a lot easier when there's two people because one person can be looking at it and then preparing the answer, and then we can bounce back and forth in between those questions. But yeah, I mean, I greatly appreciate it. Yeah, analog is more fun to listen to. The great thing about analog is you're able to get more distance. So with analog, it's, you're able to get it through the static when it's really weak. With digital communication, it's binary code, zeros and ones. It's a digital transmission. It's either going to sound good or it's going to hiccup or nothing at all. So you don't have that fringe that you would with an analog communication transmission. Just like if you monitor HD radio in your car, it's going to basically pick up really well on that HD signal, and then it's going to drop out to the analog if it loses it. And then that analog signal, it's not dragging it, but trying to get that signal as far as you can get it until the fringe, until it goes away. And that's like DXing, which I really like to do that. I like to see how far a signal will go, especially if it's a radio station. Being able to see what is the range of that signal before you completely lose it. Maybe you still hear the music or the voice through the static, but at a certain point you do lose it. And then you'll notice during the day, that signal doesn't go as far as night because that noise environment or the RF floor, increases or decreases depending on time of day. God, you're putting me on the spot. What are some common scanners capabilities in the early to mid 2000s? Well, a lot has changed over the period of time. So analog trunking was very popular during the 2000s. And then we started to see digital trunking come into play. So you had, and then phase one came in to play, and then phase two eventually came into play. So you had a wide variety of scanners that were out there. Improvements to current scanners. I mean, you think of the family tree of Uniden. So right now we've got the 996P2. Prior to that was the XT, and before that was the T. And then you had the 796D prior to that. So there's a lot of radios that came out over the period of time. So it's a progression of radios. I can't remember, I know I had in the early 2000s, the BCT 15 was, I believe, around. The 996T was around. Or was that the later that may be the later 2000s. I was probably using around that time. I was probably using my 780X XLT still, um, and then those radios I ended up using those other radios that I listed later in the 2000s. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of changes. Typically with the Uniden scanners, it's about a 5 or 6 year shelf life before they come out with a new model to replace it. That seems to be the average on the Uniden side. Thank you again, RC 944 Jim. Appreciate that. Yeah, I hear you about missing your old communication on the analog. Of course, you can hear them digital, but there's something special about hearing them analog. Yeah, I mean, the analog was great before they went to narrow banding, and then it just sounded like crap on there. And then, of course, it was kind of the way for the radio shops to say, hey, you don't like the narrow banding, come over to digital, the audio will get better. So it was kind of, the wideband analog was great. It was nice and clear. You got more distance, and then then there was that move switching from wide to narrow, and then it sounded noisy. And then of course the distance went down further when it went to narrow, but it was a selling point. Hey, you don't like your narrow band setting, come over to digital and it'll sound better. Dale, yeah, thank you so much. I know you're driving. Brandon's asking, do NASCAR fans go to the... Yes. Scanners are a huge thing when it comes to NASCAR. If you have your own scanner, you'll bring it with you. You can rent a scanner at the racetrack. But yes, to be honest with you, that's the fun part of going to a NASCAR race, is being able to listen to the in-car communication. To be honest with you, I would be bored to death if I just watched them go around and around and around. The thing with monitoring their communication over the scanner, you're able to hear the team strategizing. You're also able to hear that communication in between the crew chief, the driver, and of course the spotter. So yes, scanners I don't think will go away from NASCAR. I mean, that's certainly a great thing. It's entertaining, and it's a lot of fun being able to listen. Phase 3, not certain. So basically, the meaning in between Phase 1 and Phase 2, digital trunking, it's very simple. So Phase 1, digital, is one pathway on each frequency for communication. So when a agency switches on their trunk system the capability of Phase 2, that one frequency is able to handle two conversations at once versus just one. So if they have let's say for example we've got a site that supports Phase 2 digital. So with Phase 1, there's 10 frequencies. Let's say one of those is a voice channel, so that's used for data. I'm going to break this down as basic as possible for understanding. I mean, it may not be totally most accurate, but this is the best way to wrap your head around it. So let's say one channel is for data, and then the other 9 channels are voice. So there's communication on those channels for voice. When they go to Phase 2 digital capability, now those 9 channels can handle 9 radio transmissions, 9 voice communications. When they go to Phase 2, it doubles without having to have more frequencies on that site. So rather than just 9 channels of voice, it bumps up to 18. Each channel is able to handle 2 pathways. So it's able to handle two voice radio transmissions. So it's kind of like that frequencies, if it had bandwidth, is split and it shares, 2 lanes of traffic versus 1 lane. Hopefully that makes sense. Which scanner great question. Which scanner or scanners do I think has held the test of time? One of my favorites was the 780 XLT. I love that radio. I don't use it anymore. It is on the shelf. It's right there with the sheep with the 55. So there's the 780 XLT. My dad actually has one as well. I had multiple 780 XLTs. That was one of my favorite radios back in the day. My favorite portable radio is the basic as it can be, the BC125AT, which I use a lot for railroads. And then I had several of the 895s. Unit and Bearcat 895s. It was one of my first trunking radios, so you could either do trunk or conventional. So I had actually 2 of those stacked onto each other. But yeah, I mean, those are some of my favorite classic radios. I don't have any more of the 895s anymore. I wish I held on to one of those. I mean, it was a huge bass radio. Wide and narrow differences in between is the radio transmission, or the transmission doesn't kind of override onto neighboring frequencies. When the radio is narrow, it's more centered. It's centered, but it doesn't drift over left or right. So the whole purpose of switching radios from wideband to narrow is they're able to license neighboring frequencies. With it being wide, you need a buffer in between licensing this frequency with a neighboring frequency, because they have to allow for that overlap of that radio signal kind of going over to the left or the right on that frequency spectrum. That's the easiest way to explain it without getting so crazy technical. Is it easy to upgrade the SD card on the Home Patrol scanners? Depends on your skill level. That all really plays into a role, what your skill level is. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's fairly easy to do, using the Sentinel software. It all depends on your skill level. Yes, absolutely. A question about a system, P25 trunk system. Can it support phase 1 and phase 2? So it can. You'll notice on radio reference, on a system that supports phase 2 digital, the talk groups will be marked a certain way. So if it's digital, it'll say D for digital, and that's typically a phase 1 talk group. If you see a T, which stands for TDMA, phase 2, that will be a talk group that supports phase 2 digital. So, for example, if you had a 996 T and you were monitoring a trunk system that's phase 2, you would still be able to hear the talk groups that are, if we did a 996 XT, you would be able to hear the talk groups that are supporting phase 1. You wouldn't be able to hear the talk groups that are phase 2, unless you would have to get the 996 P2. As far as I know, the way that television stations now transmit their signals, I don't believe you can monitor the audio on a scanner anymore. because it's now transmitted digitally. Do you have any tips on buying used scanners? Be very cautious. Some people are really good with their electronics and some people are not. What drives me nuts is when I see people out there, especially with a portable radio, and they're carrying the radio by its antenna. Now, that's somebody you don't buy a scanner from. You want to buy a scanner from somebody that, of course, has, maybe purchased a carrying case for it, which has taken really good care of it. There's people with electronics, there's some people that are really good with it, and some people are really bad with it. When you're buying, anywhere, let's say online, if there's a way to be able to rate the buyer, go through those reviews, be cautious when buying electronics. I mean, it may look good on the outside, but maybe somebody has dropped or beat up this radio pretty severely or carried it a lot by its antenna. For the most part, I try to stay away from used equipment just because I don't know how this person was with their electronics. Chris asked if I still have any Radio Shack scanners. I do not. I don't think I have any Radio Shack scanners. Most of my radios are either Uniden, Whistler, or under the GRE label. But I don't think I have any Radio Shack scanners. So Radio Shack, when back in the day when they were making scanners, a lot of times Radio Shack would seek out other companies to manufacture their scanner line. Some of the radios were made by GRE before they came out with their own product line, and other radios were made by Uniden. For the most part, Radio Shack did not manufacture their own radios to a degree. As for public safety people, that are using a system that has encryption, it all depends on how knowledgeable the individual is. Most public safety people, police and fire, are just, that's their job, and that's just a tool that they use. They know that if they press the mic, it transmits to somewhere and it works. So a lot of times, public safety people are not scanner enthusiasts. The ones that are scanner enthusiasts are probably more caring and passionate about, whether or not you're able to hear it or not. Some of it is, whether or not they want transparency, then they want the encryption off. But that's an opinion that could go all over the place, depending on the individual. I know that, with certain departments, police chiefs, had encryption. And then a new police chief comes in and they're gung-ho about, transparency, so they turn off the encryption. That occasionally does happen. But usually it's a decision maker, such as a police chief, fire chief, or a group of people, that whether or not they want to use encryption or not. Yeah, 21 years old, the 780 XLT. Yeah, the remote head that was manufactured. It was really cool. But yeah, I mean, the 780 XLT was a really cool radio of its time. Being able to do trunking, having alpha tag, having a decent sized display. I mean, it was a really cool radio. I loved the 780 XLT. Was a solid unit. I had a couple of them. I think I had at least 2 or 3. I have one on the shelf there. But yeah, I love that radio. That's why I have it on display, because it's one of my favorite radios. And then that, when I really got into the hobby, that was a radio that I had to have when it came out. And it's a really good radio. How common it is for fire departments to have encryption? Personally, I haven't seen it. So in Washington, D.C., they are using encryption on everything, including the fire department. So with encryption and the fire departments, so it does create an issue with building saturation. So with digital communications, building saturation comes into play. So many times when a fire department goes into a building, communication could break down on a digital system if it doesn't saturate. Now, with encryption turned on, that even creates even more of a strain and reduces down reception. So typically with fire departments, they're concerned about building saturation when it's digital. And then if you put on encryption, that even creates even more of a challenge, being able to hear even better. So a lot of times fire departments don't use the encryption. Usually it's safer not to. Brandon's asking about the Siren app with the SDS 200. I'm trying to remember. There was some sort of capability with it. I'm trying to remember. I don't remember if it does or doesn't to a degree. The Siren app basically was made for the 536 because it's got the Wi-Fi dongle. If I remember with the 200, you would have to connect up the data port for the data port on the front of the radio, connect it up to the network and do something with that. I can't remember with that. I don't remember how much was supported. But it's not something that is common. So the Siren app was basically the safe thing for me to say was the 536. Yeah, I mean, a lot of departments are using digital and encryption, which really sucks for the, sucks on many aspects. One, for mutual aid, sucks for people that want to monitor it, and then also can hinder reception as well for the users of the system. Well, that's good to know that DC Fire has some encryption, but they're not completely encrypted. Just looking at DC, the couple times I've looked at it, it seems like everybody and their uncle is pretty much encrypted over there. All right, I think I'm going to wrap this up. We're about an hour and 14 minutes into this program. I want to thank everybody that submitted questions. I want to thank everybody that watched the program tonight. We greatly appreciate you watching this show. Certainly support us by, of course, using the affiliate link anytime that you want to buy something from ScannerMaster. The affiliate link is on every one of our videos, so just click on that and then place your order through their website, and then we get a small percentage of that sale. Danny Harmon on Train Aficionado, I'm not sure. I'll have to check what his schedule's like. Love to have him on when he's available. He's always a great conversation with Danny. Since CB radio went to FM a few years ago, do you think they'll ever go digital? No. I mean, CB radio users are looking for a radio that's budget friendly. I don't imagine they would ever go digital. I mean, digital just makes the radios more expensive. All right, that'll wrap up tonight's show. Thank you so much for watching tonight. Be safe out there. Stay cool. We'll catch you again on Train Aficionado Live, and then, of course, the Scanner Guys in July. Wow, this year's going by fast. Have a great evening. Talk to you again. Bye-bye.